Welcome back to the FTTM podcast, your guide to getting the right product to the market at the right time. This week, we're going to focus on FTTM planning, how to execute to achieve right time.
It is good to be back. And I have to say, this topic is, I think, the one that causes the most anxiety for people. You know, we talk about strategy and culture, and that all feels a little abstract.
Right, it's safe.
It's safe. But today, we're getting into the machinery, the nuts and bolts of how you build a schedule when you're literally trying to invent something that has never existed before.
That is the core problem, isn't it? Scheduling invention. And if you ask an engineer, how long until your next breakthrough, they look at you like you're crazy.
Yeah, you see that frustration all over the lateral works research we're looking at. Teams just throw their hands up. They say, innovation can't be predicted. It happens when it happens.
It's the ultimate excuse, really.
It is, but the research challenges that head on. And the core idea here is it's pretty counterintuitive. It says, if you want to go fast, you can't plan for perfection. You actually have to plan to fail.
Okay, let's pause there. Plan to fail. That sounds great in a book, but in the real world, that sounds like a good way to get your project canceled.
I know. But we're not talking about failure as in, incompetence. It's an engineering principle.
The engineering principle.
Pure engineering. The research references this great line from the economist Tim Harford, who says, business success always begins with failure. They mean failure as a necessary step, like in the scientific method.
So we're talking about trial and error.
Rigorous trial and error. Think about it. Innovation is never a straight line. It's a process of elimination. You try something, it breaks. That's a failure.
Okay.
But then you analyze why it broke. That's learning. And that learning leads to the solution. So the logic is simple. If you accelerate the failure, you accelerate the learning.
So it's not about running faster. It's about crashing faster.
In a controlled way, yes. And this is what separates what the research calls slow teams from fast teams, and has nothing to do with budget or how smart the people are. It's all about their approach to failure.
I feel like we've all been on a slow team at some point. What does that look like?
A slow team is terrified of being wrong. They use what's called the Big Bang approach. They spend months, sometimes years, trying to get it perfect on paper first.
To avoid looking bad in front of the boss.
Exactly. They're avoiding blame. But the clock is ticking, and by the time they finish their one long perfect cycle and find out they missed the mark, which you always do.
The market has already moved on.
Precisely. They've perfectly solved a problem that doesn't exist anymore.
So what's the fast team doing in the meantime?
They're following a do it, try it, fix it model. They'd rather be roughly right today than perfectly right in a year. The research says in the time a slow team does one cycle, a fast team might do 3.
3 times the learning.
3 times the data. But, and this is the big but, this runs smack into a huge cultural wall.
I can just imagine. You can't really walk into a status meeting and say, great news, everyone. We failed 3 times this week.
That's the problem. Most corporate cultures punish failure. So what do people do? They hide it. They deny it. The research even calls it reckless loss chasing, where you keep pouring resources into a bad idea because you're too scared to admit it's not working.
So to do this right, you have to make failure boring.
Yes. It's just a data point. It's just Tuesday.
Okay, I get the philosophy, but let's get practical. How do you put unknowns on a project timeline? How do you actually schedule this?
This is where we get to the methodology. The lateral works research points to a model from T.J. Rogers at Cypress Semiconductor. It's called learning cycle planning.
Learning cycles. Okay, walk me through it. How do we schedule a mystery?
You stop trying to predict the answer and you start predicting the effort to find the answer. The model is pretty simple. First, you get the team to define the difficulty of the problem. Is it easy, hard, or difficult?
It seems a bit subjective. No.
It is, but you're relying on the collective wisdom of the team. Once you agree on a category, you assign a number of cycles to it. For example, an easy problem might take 1 or 2 cycles.
And hard might take, what, 3 to 5?
Exactly. And a really difficult bleeding edge problem might take, say, 6 to 8 cycles.
And a cycle is one of those try it, fix it loops.
Correct. And you know from experience how long a cycle takes in your lab. Let's say it's 15 days.
So now you can do the math.
Now you can do the math of innovation. If your problem is hard, you estimate, let's say, 5 cycles. 5 times 15 days.
Is 75 days. Wow. You've just put a date on an unknown.
It's an order of magnitude approximation, not a guarantee. But it moves you away from what the research literally calls wild-ass guesses to something defensible.
It also feels like it changes what you're tracking. You're not just tracking a final product milestone.
That's a key point. You replace product milestones with learning milestones. There was this great case study in the research about a client whose component kept heating up to 2,000 degrees.
2,000 degrees, that's not a bug, that's a small star.
It was a disaster. It was literally vaporizing the evidence. Now, their old schedule had a milestone, prototype complete. But they couldn't complete a prototype.
Because it kept melting.
Right. So the team was demoralized. They were seen as late. Everyone was miserable. So they changed the schedule. They deleted prototype complete. The new milestone was answer why component X fails.
That is such a powerful shift. You're scheduling the question, not the widget.
And it freed the team. They weren't failing anymore. They were succeeding at answering the question.
I love that. But I have to bring up the elephant in the room. The reality distortion field.
The Steve Jobs myth.
Exactly. You always hear, Steve Jobs didn't need a schedule. He just willed things into existence. How does that fit in?
Well, the research really pushes back on that myth. It clarifies that Jobs didn't ignore reality. He was a master of focusing risk. For the first iPhone, the true invention, the real unknowns, was maybe 10% of the project.
Only 10%.
Think about it. The multi-touch screen, the software interaction, that was the magic 10%. But the other 90%, the chips, the battery, the supply chain, that was known execution. And he was absolutely ruthless about executing on that 90%.
So the lesson is isolate the magic, not ignore the schedule.
Exactly. And to do that, you need what the research calls a valid critical path, a real schedule, not a wish list.
And when you build that real schedule with the learning cycles built in, that's when you discover what they call the gap.
The gap, it's the scariest part for most project managers. It's the difference between the date the math says you'll finish and the date the market wants you to finish.
And they're never the same day, are they?
Almost never. And this is a huge difference. A regular team will hide the gap. They'll pretend it's not there to keep management happy.
We'll make it up in testing. The famous last words.
Right. But an FTTM team, they highlight the gap. They put it up in bright neon lights for everyone to see.
Why would they do that? That feels like asking for your budget to be cut.
Because it forces an honest conversation today. If we know we're 6 months late now, we can make trade-offs. We can cut scope or add resources or change our approach. Hiding the gap just means you fail 6 months from now when it's too late.
This goes back to that 90-10 rule. You separate the 10% invention so it doesn't hold at the 90% execution.
You have to.
Yep.
Don't let 5 people inventing a new material hold up 100 people in the supply chain. You isolate it, you staff it with a dedicated team, and you let them run their cycles while the rest of the project moves forward.
Okay, so we have the philosophy, the math, a valid schedule. Now what? You can't just print it and forget it.
No, it has to be a living thing. This brings us to refresh planning. The research is adamant that the schedule has to be updated weekly, at least.
Weekly. That sounds like a lot of meetings.
It's not about meetings, it's about hygiene. You're looking at the trend line. Is the date slipping out or are we pulling it in? A small slip is easy to correct. A month of small slips becomes a landslide.
And it's not just about the date, is it? There's another metric they use.
Yes, and this one is brilliant. It's the confidence trend.
Tell me about that.
So a normal project manager asks, is the task on schedule? An engineer can honestly say yes, even if they mean, yes, I'm on schedule to prove that this approach is a total disaster.
Right. I will definitely finish failing by Friday.
The classic green status report trap. Everything's green until it's suddenly fire engine red. So the FTTM question is different. It's, what is your confidence in solving this problem by that date?
So I might be on track with my work, but I only have, say, 20% confidence that the physics is going to cooperate.
And that 20% is a massive red flag. Even if the task is green on the schedule, what you want to track is the growth of confidence over time. As the learning cycles work, it should go from 20% to 50% to 90%. If it's flatlining, you have a big problem.
That forces so much honesty into the system. Let's switch to the people side of this. The research talks about the evolution of a tech startup and how teams can fall apart as they grow.
Oh, this story is universal. Stage 1 is the garage. Small team, everyone does everything. Information moves at the speed of sound.
And you get funding. Stage 2.
Stage 2, you start hiring. And the research uses this great phrase. You hire people with corporate baggage.
I love that. Well, at my old company, we had a form for that person.
That's the one. And suddenly you have silos, marketing, engineering, finance. And information stops flowing sideways. It starts going up the chain to a boss, across to another boss, and then back down.
A giant game of telephone.
It kills speed. So the research says you have to do an organizational reset. You have to deliberately create a lateral structure. You create people clusters around problems, not reporting structures.
So the electrical engineer, the material scientist, and the supply chain person are all in one group, talking directly.
They have to be. The golden rule is that information must flow laterally across the project, faster than it flows vertically up the hierarchy. If you have to ask your boss to ask their boss, you've already lost.
This brings us to a final, really important piece. It's about mindset. The research calls it when to stop dreaming.
This is a critical psychological shift in a project. In the beginning, you need a dream phase. You have to ignore the constraints to even begin something innovative.
If you started with a budget, you'd never try to land a rocket on a boat.
Never. But, and this is the but that sinks so many companies, you can't stay there. You have to transition to the reality phase where you acknowledge the risks, you measure your learning cycles, and you focus on actually shipping a product.
And if you don't make that switch, the research uses a really harsh term for it, auto-asphyxiation.
It's a vivid term. You suffocate on your own optimism, you keep dreaming, and refuse to measure failure until you run out of time or money. The project just chokes.
There's a great sports anecdote in the research about this, the one about Larry Bird.
Yes. The story is, with the game on the line, final seconds, he always wanted the ball.
And it's easy to think that's just ego. He wants the glory of the winning shot.
But the research argues it was the exact opposite. Lesser players in that moment are hoping the ball doesn't come to them. Why? Because the personal risk of missing, of being the one to blame, is too high.
But Bird was different.
For him, the risk of the team losing was greater than his personal risk of missing the shot. He cared more about the win than he did about protecting his own stats.
And that's the FTTM mindset.
That is it, right there. FTTM teams want the ball. They want to know the gap. They want to see the failures because their focus is on winning, on getting that product to the market at the right time, not on looking perfect in a status report.
So, to pull this all together, the path to the right time isn't about working harder.
It's not. It's about a rigorous, honest planning of the unknown. Using learning cycles, refreshing the plan weekly, and keeping your team structure flat and fast.
And embracing the idea that a schedule telling you that you're late today is actually a success.
It's a huge success because it gives you the time to fix it. The schedule that pretends you're on time, that's the real failure. That's the one that's truly dangerous.
Thanks for listening. Make sure to tune in next week where we will dive deeper into key practices of FTTM teams.